And Mr. Chair, there were 10 others who signed in not wishing to testify, all pro.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I've had the honor of sitting at the point of the arrow of that tribal council in Toppany. So
have a nice day.
Somebody's waving their hand at us over there.
Oh, there's a new entrant. Thank you. We have one more person wishing to testify, Patsy Whitefoot.
Welcome, Patsy. How are you?
Good morning. Good to see you.
And again, I hate to rush, but we have a lot of other bills.
I understand, Chairman.
You came from White Swan, right?
Yes, I came from White Swan. Shikmaitski Ignashwanik Sheshwapet Ku Pashtunwiki Patricia Whitefoot. Good morning to all of you, and say thank you, Senator Hunt, for this this deliberation. I'm going to be very brief. The words that were shared previously are issues that I personally experienced myself. And I want to also just thank Representative McCabe for her work and her staff on addressing this issue in this state. This is an issue that's long overdue, as you have heard. And so by that nature, I just want to say that as you consider the intent of this legislation, I plead to you to consider the impact of historical trauma on the many families who've had no resolution regarding the fate of missing and murdered Native American women. And I'm going to also provide some recommendations that I have as well. In the fall of 1986, my youngest sister, Daisy Mae, did not return home for several days. Since she had occasionally traveled to visit family members on the Yakima Reservation, the wide expanse of the Yakima Reservation, or even the Warm Springs Reservation in Oregon, I thought she would return, eventually make it home. She lived with me. During this time, there were other Yakima women that you heard about who were missing. She was reported missing. I once again experienced for myself separation, anxiety, and loneliness, similar to what I had, been subjected to when I was placed in the Yakima Indian Mission. When you're placed in a situation like that, through no fault of your own, you go through periods of trauma and anxiety. So as I addressed these kinds of issues within my own self. In the case of my sister, there had been little communication with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Yakima Nation Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. On 2 occasions more recently, the FBI visited me at my work site in the school district where I work on the Yakima Reservation, and they'd taken my saliva samples. However, there's never been any communication or any follow-up with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Today, due to the crisis faced in White Swan with unchecked crime, violence, and murder again, meetings are being held. During one meeting, I urged tribal officials to support Senator Steve Daines and Senator Jon Tester's congressional resolution to recognize a day of remembrance for missing and murdered Native American women in the United States. In response to my plea, a former tribal official stated the demise of the missing and murdered woman could be the work of a serial killer. As an older sister, I am simply seeking resolution and justice. I realize the unresolved missing and murdered women issues face jurisdictional and legal complexities. However, there is a need for statewide awareness and dedicate resources to address these unresolved issues. During this week, while we're here, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs hosted a listening session on missing and murdered Native women. And there are other congressional legislation that's going on as well, and I'm not going to name all of them. You have my written testimony. While these actions take time to be realized, it is imperative that Washington State be proactive and take action in addressing the fate of our loved ones as precious sisters, our mothers, our aunties, and our grandmothers who continue to have meaning in my life and our life. As you consider this legislation, I encourage you to seriously consider the data relevant to Native women in the United States. More than 4 in 5 American Indian and Alaskan Native, or 85%, have experienced violence in our lifetime. 56% have experienced sexual violence. 55% have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner. 48% have experienced stalking. 66% have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner, and this data is all available on the website. So specific recommendations that I have with regard to this is, first of all, be respectful and sensitive of our cultural protocols, particularly since families have not had closure in the loss of our loved ones and related issues. I urge you to provide resources to undertake the accounting of missing and murdered Native women. Secondly, expand the goal to be inclusive of missing and murdered Native women. In many cases, murdered women in our families have not secured resolution and a sense of safety about their fate or our fate as families. Finally, I applaud the goal to work with the Washington State Patrol and Governor's Office of Indian Affairs. However, I've worked here in state government as well, and I know what goes on with some of the state government and the agencies. There is a need for Native women voices to be at the table on this issue. I encourage you to utilize the expertise of Native Women's Board or a tribally responsive organization to address the impact of historical trauma and lifelong learning. I would also, just for the record, like to note that my granddaughter, Miss Wiunu Hubbard, is with me. She's a 4th grader, and I've talked to her about this, and my fears are also for her well-being as well as my other grandchildren that I have and the community that I come from. It's just not a very safe place sometimes, but that's home and that's where I live and that's where I'll continue to live. So I'd say thank you and for allowing me to be here, and it's good to see you, Chairman.
See you, thank you. And I think that was an important topic and something that we've not heard a lot about, so we stretched the time quite a bit, so the rest of you are under the gun now, but thank you very much, Patty, for coming over.
Good to see you.
And your granddaughter is here?
Yes, she's right here.